let's talk about some of the emotions of not forgiving the ones who have hurt us, or not forgiving ourselves as we're learning along this journey. It starts with us. What are some of the emotions that come to mind? I think of resentment. I think of bitterness. I think of anger. I think of shame and guilt. Um, Help me out if there's anything I'm missing. But those are some.
Um,
Go ahead, Ted.
sorry. No, I was just because I think there was a really good point that was just made by, and it was about how it's not really about forgiving the other person. It's about forgiving yourself. Because I know that with some relationships in my life, was so, I guess, this, it's kind of hard to find the specific word because I don't know if it's like disappointment or
Mhm.
guilt or whatever it may be in yourself, uh, for allowing certain people to hurt you a certain way, even though you saw the signs. And even though I mean, personally speaking, like, there is someone I have in mind, and um, just it took me some time to learn how to. I can not really forgive myself for just not holding on to the hope that things would change with this person, or that just the relationship would be different, like just a general relationship, not being specific about anything, but
Right.
just I think it's just a hope that something better could come from it, because you really wanted something good to come from it. You really wanted that person to feel, the same way, but it just wasn't the case. And learning how to be, to forgive, to be okay with the fact that you tried and it wasn't enough, and not wholly being like, well, thinking of yourself in an extremely negative way just because you really wanted a certain thing to work out even though it didn't. Again, personally speaking, that was definitely my experience with a few relationships, just learning to forgive myself for feeling like, I was just very, I wasn't smart about how I felt about this person, and how I
Hmm.
went about, my relationship with them. And that's, yeah, that was a really, I think that was a fantastic point, because um, that definitely applies to my experiences, at least
Right.
some of them. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Ted, for being vulnerable and sharing that with us. That's very good insight. And there's a few things that I heard you say as you were sharing, and it goes back to the emotions that I'm sure some of us have felt, most of us maybe, but definitely myself, the emotions of not forgiving and being hateful, being resentful, bitter, hopeless, disappointed, feeling guilt and shame, bitterness, all of those things. I felt like I was carrying that around with me, and it was in a backpack, and like I'm trying to move on and trying to move forward with my life, but I just feel slowed down because I'm carrying all that stuff that I'm not talking about around with me, and along my journey of healing and finding forgiveness and understanding, for my grandfather and his pain, and him growing up as an orphan, and how that affected my father, and how my father passed down that pain and was abusive towards my mother, and then how that landed me and my siblings in foster care. And there was a time in my life where I was like, why all of this? Like, why me? Why do I got to deal with all this stuff? And I don't like it, and I hate it, and I don't want it, and forgets you, and whatever, and I ran into a brick wall, and I realized that I was carrying all that around with me. And it wasn't until I chose to understand and find empathy, to where I could take the backpack off and take the weight off my shoulders and forgive my parents for what has happened, forgive myself for hurting people in my relationships, and for others who have hurt me, the same thing. All is forgiven, And yes, Dr. Houston, you do bring up a really good point that it does start with myself, because I could say it out loud and truly not wholeheartedly mean it, because I feel these emotions arise when I'm around those people, like family members. Now, my grandfather just passed away, and we're all coming together and trying to cultivate his services and all this stuff, but like no one's really been around the way we've been around, and we're all looking at each other like, there's a bunch of resentment coming to the surface, so it's going to be interesting how that all unfolds. But I choose to love, and I choose to forgive the ones who have hurt me and my family, and that doesn't justify what they've done to me. It does not set them off the hook, but it frees me from the prison, like Richard told me, like Richard talked about. It frees me from the prison of carrying that weight around with me. Thank you for letting me vent a little bit.
It's learning the lessons. And, I want to ask the guys, have you ever just, and I want to keep it kind of light, but have you ever lent some money to somebody and they said they were going to pay you back? Right? And then they don't. And then you come around them, and then they got the latest, Jordans or sneakers on, or they flossing something, whatever the term, how you young people talk, right? They're, they got something nice, and you thinking, and you looking at them like, wait a minute, you still owe me some money, right? So how do you deal with that when it comes to forgiveness?
So, I mean, I would say that has happened to me before, and I dealt with that situation the wrong way. And eventually I thought about it, and I fixed it. So what happened was I had friends that were siblings, and the brother wanted to borrow money. And so when people say, can I borrow? It's whether it doesn't matter if it's, $2, $3, whatever, $10. It's your word, right? I take that seriously that they said borrow. Now they said, can I have $2? I'll be like, sure. Never think about it again. But that word means that, I take their word, and that means a lot to me. So anyway, they never paid me back. And so since I was friends with the two siblings, I asked the sister, I was like, oh, hey, I like this DVD movie that she had. It was 51st Dates or something. And and then so she let me borrow it. And so I was like, cool. I didn't give it back to her, and she kept asking for it and asking for it. And I'm like, well, your brother never paid me back. And he's like, what is that? She's like, what does that have to do with me? That, that was the deal between you and him. And I'm like, yeah, but you could kind of like push him to give me my money. And then so forth. It just went like that. I didn't give her the movie. It was very petty, actually. I didn't give her the movie for like about a year. We were still friends. Throughout that time. And then after a year, I was like, you know what? I'm over here being petty. She's all like, you never gave me my movie, but jokingly. And I was like, you know what? All right, fine. Here's your movie. I still have it. I kept it in good condition. It doesn't matter that your brother didn't pay me back. I just, now I know not to let him borrow any more money. And so, it goes back to me thinking, damn, like I did the wrong thing, and it took me a whole year to realize it. That yes, the deal wasn't between her and me; it was between her brother and me. So, and I was like, sorry. I even took her out to lunch. It was all good.
Sounds like you borrowed the movie for a year or so.
Right.
The movie. I hear you, though. I hear you. Yeah. It's tough. My cheeks are getting tight because I'm smiling so much. So thank you for that story, Richard. Forgiveness, man, it really does come down to something small like that, how we operate in those moments within our relationships.